Welcome to the Inside Carolina podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley, joined by Greg Barnes and Ross Martin. That means it is On the Beat podcast. We are recording this after the Monday's press conference with Mack Brown, Jay Bateman, and several players. Ross, I'll come to you first, and I mentioned Jay Bateman there because we have some sort of love affair going on with a certain linebacker that's going to get a lot of playing time Saturday night, and that's Eugene Asante. What does Jay Bateman see in Asante that's going to sort of lift the burden on Saturday from Chaz Surratt's opt-out?
Yeah, and I think we'll get into a lot of the people that are replacing the opt-outs, but I'm writing on Eugene Asante and Jay Bateman's confidence in him, and he doesn't seem to be too concerned about losing Surratt. It's hard to replace Surratt, but, I mean, he thinks Asante was the best backup that UNC had. They really didn't play a lot, so the guy who hasn't seen much action, they're confident in Eugene Asante. They think he can step right in. He has all the tools. They're high on him as a recruit. He's worked hard, always in the film room, all the classic cliches. You couldn't find a man more confident in Eugene Asante than Jay Bateman. So, I mean, take that for what it's worth, but it doesn't seem like there's too much drop-off between the two. We'll see. But I know the message boards have always been high on wanting to see Asante, and this is going to be the chance. He's expected to get all the snaps where Chaz was, which is a pretty demanding position. And on defense, there's a lot of players in there. So it's not like he's going to have to he'll be helped out by Gimmel, but this is his second year in the system. So be excited to see what he can do. 6 foot, 210 pounds, nothing crazy there, but super athletic. Plays that will linebacker position, which is trusted to make a lot of tackles in the defense with way the run. They try to move the run game, and also has to do a lot of coverage skills. But super athletic, fast, athletic, can move the hips there, and it should be interesting to see because he's the future. So we're going to see a lot of the future of the linebacker position with Gimmel and Asante playing together in the Orange Bowl.
That was one of the funny comments Mack Brown said. A lot of guys have been wanting to play. Well, here's your chance. Yeah. It's time to step up. Greg, when I see Gimmel and I listened to his presser today or on Monday, and he's talking about Asante, it sort of reminds me of the way Miles Dorn had to do last year. He had to make sure guys were in the right spot, were doing what they were supposed to be, and it sort of maybe took away from his game a little bit at times because he was worried about that. Do you envision – I know Gimmel said he felt like after the first quarter or so, Asante should be fine, but how much guidance is Asante going to be able to get on the field during the game?
I think a good bit. And I think one of the things we kind of overlook with Surratt's decision is that Gimmel's the linebacker that calls out the plays. So if you're losing that component, that would be a much bigger deal. So Gimmel is kind of the quarterback now of that defense. And so he will be able to help Asante. The fact that they do line up relatively close to one another, he can have that communication pretty easily. I think kind of where you're lacking is, as we saw against Miami and as we saw against Notre Dame, Surratt did a really good job spying at times on those quarterbacks, and Bateman gave him some leeway in terms of making plays, whether it be in coverage or coming up on delayed blitzes and making sure those guys stayed in the pocket. So that's going to be a difficult ask for Asante if they want to put him in that role. So you've got to pare down things because he doesn't have that experience. So I think there's no doubt he's going to be a great player. He probably does not know the nuance of a lot of these things quite yet. And that is a benefit of having 2 weeks instead of just one to prepare. You can really kind of coach him up to be prepared for some of that stuff that Kellen Mond and that offense will do. But it's still going to be a challenge for him. You can mitigate it somewhat with Gimmel's experience there beside him.
One thing that was concerning, Ross, is I can't remember. I think it was Bateman, may have been Mack Brown, said they played him a lot against Virginia Tech, and it didn't really work out with what they were trying to ask him to do.
He played him at nickelback, it sounded like, which, I mean, I didn't really know that, but that's where he's got his most snaps against Virginia Tech, and he played, I guess, a hybrid nickel position, which Bateman said didn't really fit what he can do, and he wasn't really able – his skills weren't made for that position. So maybe they tried to get him on, which makes me think that, they thought he was one of the best 11 defenders. They just wanted to get him on the field like they've done a lot with Trey Morrison. but that nickel hybrid linebacker position or whatever that was didn't work out. But no, he's been the guy whenever Chaz comes out for a break or gets injured. He plays a lot of snaps on special teams. I mean, and it was assumed when Chaz opted out that everybody immediately knew it was Asante's role. Like, he is the backup, so there was no confusion there, no competition. He's been waiting in the wings and kind of waiting his opportunity and preparing accordingly. You know, Gimmel mentioned, you know, him just always watching tape and kind of getting extra reps and staying ready. Preparing to be a starter is a little bit different than preparing to be the backup, with the idea that maybe you'll get in. So it's been a little bit different last 2 weeks, but Bateman thinks he'll be ready, and he's super pumped to watch him play. So keep your eyes out on number 8.
Number 7, Kadre Jackson.
Who's 8?
Kadre Jackson's number 8. That's the back.
That's the other backup.
Yeah, so he's the backups to the backups that are playing.
And on that note, Bateman mentioned Cedric Gray as an impressive freshman who would be the backup there as well. So the depth chart in that room is Gimmel, Asante, and then Jackson, and the true freshman Cedric Gray right behind them.
It's incredible that Carolina's in the Orange Bowl, and these guys are going to have to play huge roles. Greg, before we move off of Asante and Gimmel, you described Gimmel as the play caller. Just sort of break down their roles a little bit, because Chaz seemed to play the see ball, hit ball guy a lot, where Gimmel was the manager out there. Sort of break down those two positions.
Well, it's just a matter of skill set and what Jay Bateman wanted to do. I mean, I don't think there's much difference in the inside linebacker positions. It's just kind of each guy is assigned a role. That's one of the unique things about Bateman's scheme is he's kind of harped on the idea of it being positionless. And the reason why is that he can call certain plays, and then within that particular play that he calls, he can say, okay, well, I'm going to tag this cornerback, or I'm going to tag this linebacker or this defensive end in this particular role. So it can be the same play, but the blitz is coming from 3 different positions depending on who he tags. And so you don't want to complicate things too much at the inside linebacker position. And when I say call the plays, when Bateman signals stuff in, the guys in the secondary are getting it, Gimbel's getting it, and guys up front are getting it. Especially with how quickly these offenses run. So they kind of know what they're supposed to be doing anyway. So it's not the old school days where you have Mike Singletary who gets the play call and shares it with everybody. It's a bit more nuanced than that. But he is the guy that kind of makes sure everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing on the front end, on the back end. And that's really the primary difference. The fact that Surratt is such a freak athlete, his skill set really, because he's so young, so raw at the linebacker position, they really liked what he could do rushing the passer. And so they just put those responsibilities on him more so than Gimmel.
It also sounds like they made Chaz the extra defender to make the tackle in a lot of instances where the play was funneled towards him. And I think in the second half of the season, you saw Gimmel rushing the passer a lot more too, and being a guy in the backfield. So the roles do have confusion. They wanted Chaz to be there to make the tackle, because Bateman said they expect Asante to be there to make a lot of tackles as well, as opposed to Asante and Chaz play the will position, whereas I think Gimmel's more than Mike. Is that right, Greg?
Yep.
Yeah. Nailed it. I was going to ask, who's Mike Singletary, Ross?
Chicago Bears middle linebacker.
Oh, okay. That's just making
86 Bears.
I was just making sure.
Super Bowl shuffle.
Yeah, that's right.
Nice. I'm impressed.
My birth year.
You're not as young. Oh, well, never mind.
former 49ers head coach. He dropped his pants in the locker room.
Nice tidbit there. Only Ross Martin.
That is a macho move, isn't it?
And told him what he thought of him. Let me refocus here. Let's talk. Let's switch it up and talk about backups at the running back position.
Oh yeah.
Javante's opted out. A little bit of a surprise, but they knew Carter was going to be out. Ross, I come back to you again. I mean, I like Elijah Green of who I've seen, but it sounds like he might be down the totem pole a little bit for Josh Henderson and British Books.
That's what it sounded like with just how Mack said that there's a couple more things that Elijah Green has to learn. It sounds like British Brooks may be the starter. I think that Henderson's always been a little bit behind. I don't know. That's how I feel. I don't know if Greg will agree with me, but Greg, you were a little bit off there. It sounded like British Brooks is the starter. Is that what you kind of took away?
That's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah, and then Henderson, and then Elijah Green. I agree with you, Tommy, that Elijah Green maybe has the bigger upside as maybe more of the athlete, has a little more swivel, a little more athleticism. So I think we'll see all three, but you've got to teach these guys quick. So they're probably putting in Brooks and Henderson a lot, and keeping kind of Elijah Green as the backup. But that's it. Those are the only three scholarship running backs left because of DJ Jones's injury. So we've seen Brooks in spring games, and we've seen him in mop-up duty. It looks like he's going to get the start for UNC, and he's been the team captain for special teams the last 2 years. So he is a voice in the locker room. He's a leader. He's a veteran, but he hasn't gotten the shine yet at running back. He'll get that January 2nd.
Yeah, and that's the challenge here, is because you've got DJ Jones, who may have been your primary number 3 guy, and he's out because of a foot injury. Elijah Green played in basically an I formation run offense in high school, so he's not up to task yet with all the pass block concepts that's required. So that drops him down a bit. We know what Brooks can do. He's an Ashbrook native, so props to the Gastonia peeps. But I mean, you're talking about a walk-on junior as your primary guy, and I think I think Ross is exactly right in the hierarchy there. But then, I mean, with Brooks being your special teams captain, I mean, that filters down to special teams. And so where do you limit Brooks? Do you let him do everything and risk potential injury? Do you try to pick and choose where you want him, which could potentially hurt you on either offense or special teams? So there's very much a kind of a snowball effect of not having Javonte get you into this area where guys that you're using on other parts of the team are now having to be a focus offensively, and it just mixes up everything.
That's where the late declaration by Javonte, I think, muddies the water even more, because you're right. Carolina's special teams, we could argue that they cost them 2 games this year. And you take British Brooks off of that, and you're right. How does it filter down? I mean, I don't think running backs are the key to this ball game, at least getting yards. But I think there's a lot of other stuff going on there. And you're right. The filtering down is what should be concerning the most. Ross, I'll come to you, the last one that we don't ever talk about, because Carolina's wide receiver room is so stacked, for lack of a better term. I mean, Dyami Brown made a decision to opt out of this one and go pro as a junior. He's been fantastic, and Carter and Javonte get a ton of ink, and rightfully so, but Brown has been a difference maker early in games this year.
Yeah, you're missing your best wide receiver and the best deep threat, but I think UNC's wide receiver group is the deepest and the most talented. You just look at down the line. I mean, Joffrey Brown, his brother, will step in. Mack Brown mentioned Antoine Green, who is a big-time recruit and a big get for UNC, who just has been injured a lot, hasn't done much at all at UNC, and he had a touchdown, I think, against Western Carolina. They mentioned him today, so he seems the guy to get more plug there. Who am I missing? Emory Simmons will play more, but I think the deep threat guys, the speedsters, going to be Brown and Green. But then you think about Rontavious Groves, hasn't played a lot either, so there's a lot of names. It'll be interesting to see who gets the most time. But, yeah, I think that's the least of the concerns. But, I mean, you miss your best player. You remember what happened in 2016 when Mack Hollins got injured. When that deep threat is gone, when that speedster can take the top off the defense is gone, it changes the whole offense. So that's a huge difference maker, because it obviously takes the safety out of play sometimes. You always have to worry about that long route. So Dami's the best at it for UNC, and he's not playing. But we'll definitely get a glimpse of what the receiver group looks like next year. And hopefully guys like Josh Downs and some younger guys will get a lot of time, and we can see what they can do.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I wonder what it's like in the Brown household with Joffrey having to tweet out, "Hey, we got recruited for a reason," when everybody's overlooking them. Greg, let me come to you to ask you about the NFL process just a little bit. I know that Daryl Moody and some other guys on staff were responsible or helpful to these players to get their read on what could be expected with the NFL. But Mack said that none of that has come back yet, and Brown and Javonte made the decision to go ahead and declare for the draft. How's that work?
That's an interesting question, Tommy. I don't know how it works in terms of the players making a decision without having that information available, which is I had assumed when the guys initially had made their decision that they had received some feedback, because the NFL Draft Advisory Committee, basically what that group does is it's a service that kids that are considering entering the draft early, they can fill out a form, send it in, and that advisory committee checks with sources throughout the league. So check with GM offices all throughout all 32 teams, and they get a kind of an idea, an average grade of, all right, we think this kid is going to be a first day pick. We think he's going to be a second day pick. And then after that, they don't give you an option. They say you need to come back or whatever it may be. And then they give you some things to work on potentially. I think everybody remembers Mitch Trubisky. He got his back pretty quickly. It was well before the bowl game that he was going to be a first round selection. He didn't make his decision, however, until after the bowl game. I think him and his family made the decision right around New Year's Day that year. And so, as you said, Daryl Moody, kind of his role with this team is to provide that type of feedback to the players and converse with agents and converse with NFL sources throughout the league, kind of like Roy Williams does for his players, and provide a kind of a more detailed response than what the advisory committee does. And then, of course, he's the guy that handles pro day in the spring and those types of things. But the fact that those guys made this decision without getting that feedback is interesting. And somebody clearly is in their ear, and Mack mentioned that on Monday, that it sounds like somebody told them that they couldn't improve on their performance against Miami, and therefore they should let that be the final college game of their careers and move forward. I will say there was some legitimate optimism that Javonte Williams was going to return not only for the bowl game, but for his senior season. And that was as of early December, that while they knew that Diami likely was going to go, there was some expectation that Javonte may decide to come back. And so clearly that has changed. But yeah, to make these decisions without that direct NFL feedback is fascinating in this case.
Yeah, I mean, there's a quote from Mack Brown that's, I mean, basically what Greg just said, but just very telling about kind of what happened. He goes, and it seems to me that someone has advised him not to play in the ball game because they had such great games against Miami. They don't really need to show themselves anymore. There's a possibility they could get hurt. So I would think that's what probably has been involved with the family decision-making more than anything else, but you have to ask them. All I have to say is said they weren't going to play, and I just said, thank you for all your effort, all you've done for us. Good luck, and we'll help you with the draft. We'll help you in the combine. We'll help you any way we can. And usually if I say what changed or something, it's usually, just the family, and I decide what was best for me. And it's not my place to make them feel pressured, and then that's all I ask more than that. So, yeah, it sounds like someone, I mean, agents or whoever's involved told them not to play. And I don't know. I guess we don't – there's a whole conversation here, but you kind of – it is what it is, you know. I mean, there is the risk, and they probably don't have to prove anymore. At least Javonte certainly doesn't.
Yeah, I tend to agree. You do what you can do, and you prove yourself. And there's, I don't know, it's kind of two different hats there.
Yeah.
It's you know, but Carolina is in the Orange Bowl Saturday night, 8:00, Texas A&M. I'll talk to Greg Barnes later in the week on the Game Plan podcast with Jason Staples, Ross Martin. We're going to forego basketball. We're going to opt out of basketball discussion on this podcast. You guys hadn't had Roy Williams since NC State, right?
No, and I guarantee you he is still seething about that one.
Yeah, he was quite a little ticked after that NC State ball game. But what was it like covering over there, Greg? Same Zoom and everything?
Yeah, same. I mean, that's you basically – yeah. You just kind of – it was a free-for-all because we sat on the concourse, and there were no assigned seats. There was a couple of tables set up. They told you to space apart. And then about an hour after the game, they're like, get out of here. We got to go home. So
so you didn't even get press row there? In press row up way up the top?
That's the hockey press row
they
up
did.
there.
They didn't even let us up there. So
I mean, hey, we can talk about here briefly. What do you think? We haven't talked since then. I mean, what do you think the issue is with the basketball team, Greg? What's the big concern? I've been asked this by friends and family over the holidays, so I want to hear what you would say.
I mean, I think it's guard play. I think Armando Bacot's playing really well. I think the fact that you don't have a scoring option at the 3 spot is problematic. And I know a lot of people say, well, just put Curran Walton in or put Puff Johnson in and let them learn and provide scoring along the way. It's not how Roy Williams does it. You have to be able to do more than just score the ball. But when you combine that with the fact that the freshman guards, who I think R.J. Davis is going to be a really good player for UNC. I think he's got that potential. Caleb's just struggling. He's trying to learn how to run the offense and score. But when all those guys, R.J., Caleb, and Leakey aren't scoring for you, teams can just collapse into the post.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much it.
It makes it so much harder to pass to the post when you have that. And passing the post is difficult already. You have long arms, we talked about this on the last podcast. I mean, getting the ball inside is a lot harder than it sounds. It's easy to say pass it down low, but it's harder to make the great passes. And then, I think the fact that Caleb Love is not hitting threes is just a game changer. Leakey is what he is, man. He's not a shooter. Doesn't sound like he's going to be a shooter. So the fact that they don't have much shooting, R.J. Davis is the best of those 3 shooting from deep, I believe, but he's still not knocking them down at any sort of rate. So when your 3 wings are not 3-point shooters at all, all shooting under 30% and some shooting under 15%, that really hurts you offensively. And then just the basics of running the offense, getting the ball inside, I think is really hurting them because they got to feed the guys, and it's just not happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, they rank 237th in effective field goal percentage. They rank 254th in turnover percentage and 308th in 3-point field goal percentage.
Yeah, that's out of 330.
It's all guards and wings and stuff. Yeah, I mean, so they're keeping Leakey in because he's a good rebounder, good defender, and that's just – I mean, even though Kerwin's gone off and Puff has had moments, it's just tough to make that switch. We'll see if it's maybe becomes more of a 20-20 deal, in terms of 20 minutes for each player. But
and nobody complained about Jack Emanuel not being able to score.
Yeah.
Now.
Because you had Rashad McCants and Raymond Felton.
No, so that's not an excuse. I don't mention it for my point is that there are pieces here that are lacking. And so if you've got really good scoring guards, Leakey's perfect for that role because he does a lot of different things. But all of a sudden his weaknesses kind of rise up when you're not getting that scoring production at the other positions.
And I think Caleb has shown that he can get to the basket, and you're seeing those flashes here and there of his ability, and you want to see more and more of that. Same with Leakey. I mean, you've seen Leakey get into the mid-range and score around the basket a little bit. Still missing some gimmies, but you kind of see that. You just want more of that out of Caleb Love because if he can drive to the basket, it kind of opens up a couple things at least. They just need a shooter or two because I think Armando, and I think when Garrison's getting opportunities, he's played well, but he's not playing like he did last year, obviously.
Yeah, but to your point, Ross, like what Caleb did against Kentucky, and part of that's because Kentucky's young, but part of it's their style of defense. He was able to create lanes, and he was able to get to the rim. And that's what you want to see him do.
Yeah.
It's going to be the Syracuses and the Virginias where it's not going to be that easy. And I think this team can really struggle if those guys don't start shooting better from the outside by then.
Well, it's also they did well against other young teams.
Sure.
And against, I mean, you look at a team like Gonzaga, we know they're the best, but they're very experienced with a young stud that can play with a bunch of experienced guys. But let me ask you, Greg, name 3 players on Carolina that are playing above expectations this year.
Day'Ron Sharp, Armando Bacot. It's a good question.
I'd go Kerwin.
Maybe Kerwin. And I think R.J. Davis is pretty close to expectation.
And And one thing, I mean, look, they lost. I'm looking at the schedule right here. They lost State by 3. They lost Texas by 2. And they got killed by Iowa. So they hit one more 3 in each of those games. Those are W's.
And
But
how much would 4 extra games against gimmies like Elon help?
Yeah, we're making excuses here because it could obviously go the other way too. Like obviously State and Texas missed shots as well, but it's definitely not like last year. And you're seeing flashes, and I think you're seeing a lot of positives. And I've written about that a couple times, but there are some glaring issues and concerns, as my column said on Christmas Eve or Christmas 23rd.
And we've talked about this before, but North Carolina is not alone, and so we tend to look into these things in kind of in a vacuum. But outside of Gonzaga and maybe Baylor, I mean, all these teams are struggling. If you look at the ACC, for example, Ken Palm's projections, they've got Duke as the best team projection-wise at 13-6 in the ACC standings. I mean, so it's going to be a very competitive season. Whichever team makes the most strides between now and February is probably going to be the team that ends up winning the regular season.
All right, let's get political, Greg. Do we see February?
Do we see February?
Jeez, it's like religious too.
In the sports world or just in general?
Yeah. Omni thinks the world's going to
end. I do. I think the next couple of weeks are going to be a challenge just because, I mean, what they come out and said that there's 1.2 million people in the airports the day after Christmas. So you would assume that the spike that we've been seeing in the last month will probably continue for another couple of weeks. And so you may see some more games postponed or even canceled. That's the thing. You talk about postponing games. Where are you going to make them up at? I understand that the choices are going to be there to try to make it up. But like UNC's got one open date on their schedule. So I don't see the Syracuse game being made up. We'll have to see, but there's going to be some games lost, I think, in the next couple of weeks. But if you get through that and everything looks okay and you're not seeing many cases pop up throughout the league, then I think you'll be able to finish the season.
What about Duke shutting it down, Ross? You Coach Banghart, y'all are tight. Have you asked her?
Duke women.
Have you asked her about Duke women shutting it down?
I'm not on I don't have a personal texting relationship with Coach Banghart yet.
I mean, that's just interesting that.
And then Duke lost the game today, right, to Pittsburgh?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, remember Duke was the men's basketball team that shut down the ACC tournament as well. So they've been on kind of the front lines of ending seasons.
It's very interesting.
Which might be an administrative thing maybe. I'm not sure.
It's interesting. I don't understand, knock on wood, traveling to Miami to see a ball game, but these guys are basically in a bubble, are they not, except for the holiday? I mean, and you got these teams that are out there getting wrapped up in it. I don't know. Maybe Mack Brown set the standard that we think everybody should be able to hold, and it just doesn't work that way. Ross Martin, Greg Barnes, it's been On the Beat podcast. Gentlemen, until next week, we'll talk soon.
Tommy.
Thanks, Tommy.